This is a conversation I had with my good friend Tad Nakamura, who's a super talented documentary filmmaker. He's done films such as Pilgrimage and A Song for Ourselves. This film's called Third Act. It is a film about his father. It premieres at Sundance. And it's different because he was setting out to make a film about his father's work, his father's life. His father is, if you didn't know, you gotta know, he's a legend in Asian American film and media. But during the shooting of this documentary, Robert Nakamura was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Therefore, it changed how Tad approached this work. So I saw the film, really dug it, really loved it. Very, very moving. And I talked to him about it, so check it out.
What's up, man?
What's up, Tad? How you doing, man?
All right, dude, it's been a minute.
Yeah, I know. I was like, yo, you make me jump through hoops? No, just kidding.
Gotta talk to my publicist. Maybe we could talk.
Anyway, man, so like congrats on the film. I checked it out and I loved it. It was very relatable. And most importantly, first and foremost, I was like, when I saw, all those muscle shots of you, I was like, yo, I gotta go work out. I just did some like curls before this. I mean, I guess I want to ask you, like, you know, you're a filmmaker, your pops is a filmmaker. You said in the film that you always wanted to make a movie about your dad. And when did you get that sense that you want to do it? And when did you actually decide to do it?
Yeah, I think I mean the original maybe the biggest inspiration was probably my dad's film Watari Dori Birds of Passage, which was a film on his dad along with two other Issei Japanese Americans. So I think I think it was always I knew the result of that film, and that result was me being able to see my own grandfather as a younger man, to see him, see his story. I think it's one thing to hear stories about even your own family, but I think when you see them on a screen, or even especially when you see them in a theater, and other people are watching their stories, it somewhat legitimizes, their story to you. And so, for example, like for that film, I watched that film in some of my Asian American studies classes, and so it was a trip. Like the amount of pride sitting there, having like other students look at my Ji-chan, kind of validated his story even more to me. But I think, so I always that was kind of the inspiration. I'd be like, oh, that would be cool if I could do that for my grandkids. But before that, I think you and I we've known each other for a long time. I think probably the first time we met was probably Aram's wedding. But besides that, a lot of the functions were like at visual communications events. And I think there's that pride in that. Like it's cool, but then part of me, is like, these motherfuckers know my dad started this shit. Like there's kind of like a there's this there's a kind of boisterous pride that it's not anything I did, but what my dad did. And so I
Yeah.
think always kind of wanting to basically put my dad's work and legacy, down on film or kind of in the canon of Asian American studies or Asian American media was kind of the initial kind of inspiration.
When did you decide to actually move forward with it? Did you feel like you personally needed enough experience, that you need enough time, that you just, needed to really kind of see your pops in a certain way to actually execute it, right? Because you didn't do it 15 years ago. You started, I guess, like in 2020.
A little bit earlier than that, yeah, like around
Yeah.
2017, 2018. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
actually, that now that you mention it, there's always been this like, oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not, in order for me to make the film my dad deserves, I have to be at this level of filmmaking, and I never felt I was there yet, and probably would never feel I'm ready for that. But it wasn't until my dad started slowing down. Now we know it's early signs of Parkinson's, but then we didn't know. So I would say probably, around 2015, 2016, my dad had retired. He was in his 70s, but I just noticed he was slowing down. He wasn't as sharp. Because, I think I've been working with my dad for so long, any little, I could tell just little things were different. Because I've seen him in his prime, right, which is super sharp, being able to kind of have these big picture thoughts, or even, small long-term or short-term memory. So I did notice that he was slowing down, and I kind of chalked that up to, oh, he just retired. He had this identity of being a film professor for over 30 years that's now gone. But I think the main issue at that point was his depression was really hitting him hard. And I think he's had depression his whole life, but the now that we know that it was Parkinson's, I think Parkinson's definitely enhanced depression as a symptom. So it was both him slowing down was like, oh, better do it now. Time is running out. Kind of do it before it's too late. And then once we started filming, and that's when actually the diagnosis happened during production of the film.
I mean, how did that change things? Because you said you thought it was just, a couple like normal, something normal, just like a retiree getting a little bit older. But, how did that change your focus? Do you feel like even more urgency to do things?
There was definitely an urgency, and I think once he got diagnosed, there was definitely a point where I was like, "Oh shit, I waited too long." Um, you know, and because the film, I think initially the film I wanted to make was a lot more simple. Was just about his career, his achievements, maybe more of a portrait of an artist. Um, and I think once he got diagnosed, and then also too, he was really slowing down. Some interviews he couldn't even get through. Um, I kind of was like, oh wow, like I missed that window to do this. But then, I think once we decided I would be a character, and also I think a big decision was once we decided the process of making the film would be in the film. So kind of letting the viewers look into more of the behind the scenes, because really the structure of the film is trying to make the film. And I think once
Hmm.
that happened, and once I kind of realized I would have to play more of a character in the film, I think that's when we really decided to like, well, let's lean into this diagnosis and kind of integrate this as part of the film, and also use it to not only figure out the film we're going to make, but then it ended up process of making the film really helped us personally just process his diagnosis and his slowing down.
When you took over the film, because he wasn't able to be there the way he had been before, was that like a unnerving moment for you?
Well, I think it was definitely. I mean, it's still it. I think that my biggest anxiety my whole life, and still is, I've been so dependent on my dad for everything, and my parents, and because I'm kind of following in his footsteps, because we're kind of a filmmaking team. I feel like all my success has been because of him. And so I think my biggest anxiety is like, can I still continue to be successful both as a filmmaker and a father when he's no longer here? Um, but I do think at the end of the film, or the end of the process, I realized, because he wasn't able, slowly and slowly he was able to do less and less. I kind of had to prove it to myself out of necessity to get this film done. But I also do think, that was his way of telling me that I was ready, because he had total trust in me to pull off the film. And
Mhm.
I think it was one of those things of like, I might not have had believed in myself, but he did, and that helped me kind of take it on. So I think, um, yeah, I think for me, just the amount of growth that happened over this film has definitely been more. One, this is the hardest film I've ever made, but at the same time, uh, coming out of it, I think I've learned and grown the most at any other project. But
Mhm.
I would say that was because I had to, not necessarily because I felt ready.
Have you ever thought of getting a perm like your dad?
I
That was sweet.
permed out salt and pepper perm. Yeah, like I think the reason why I've never thought about it is because of my dad. I saw those photos and was like, oh no, never, never, never the perm.
The film has a lot of restraint. Shooting this thing is tough enough. Watching your father, someone that you love and look up to, go through things, and then editing it, right? Like, how do you shape it, and how do you decide what's too much of, you don't want to start pandering to like overly emotional stuff. Like, how did you decide where to go? How did you find that emotional through line?
I really didn't, and I think that's why and how, the only reason we came out with a 90-minute film is because the editor Victoria Chop really worked on it and really hammered initial blueprint out because up until recently I've always edited all my stuff, and that was the plan to edit this film. I think people always told me, well, you're gonna be, you're pretty close to it, it's gonna be hard. And I kind of didn't really understand what they meant. But I think especially once I became a character in the film, that was really different for me, and that was really hard for me as then I was super really too close to it as to be an editor. So really, like, it wasn't, and I think I was shooting and shooting for so long that by the time it was we had to kind of put an assembly together, I really had no clue where to start at all. Assistant editor Lou Nakasako started, at least started chunking scenes together out of the dailies and the raw footage, and then yeah, it was really the producer Yuri Chung, um, EP Spencer Nakasako that kind of forced me to start thinking about, okay, what's the story going to be about? What's the structure? And I still like I think Yuri got pretty frustrated because I was just stalling, right? Because I think emotionally I was going through it. Part of me felt like the longer I could hold on to production, the longer I could kind of maintain my dad's health. Meaning like I kind of felt at one point, as long as I could keep this film going, I could keep me and my dad's working relationship going on forever. But it was really, Victoria Chalk, who, from an outside perspective, kind of saw the arcs in my character. I think the easiest part was always my dad's arc, at least his career arc, because we knew what he had done career wise. We had kind of known, his experience during World War II to being a filmmaker. But I think the hardest part was really creating an arc for myself, and in that case, I was definitely too close, and Victoria is the one that really kind of helped create that structure and create that arc for my character. So it was definitely hard though. I mean, this is definitely the hardest film I had to make, both emotionally but even creatively, because we just also too had just so much footage, because we had all of my basically my dad's lifetime of work, and then we were shooting, all the time for 6 years. And so at that point, it was just so much footage, so many also themes that I wanted to get across. Um, but yeah, I was lost. So, and luckily the editor really kind of created a initial assembly, and that's when we could kind of really see the potential, and then kind of just started chipping away from there.
There's a moment where, your father gets emotional. I'm guessing he wasn't part of the filmmaking process as much at that point. Like you said, you never seen him really cry too much. Then putting this out there, was that difficult to include? And did you feel like you had to ask him, or like, get some kind of unspoken permission or anything like that?
At first, when we first started filming, I was self-censoring, right? I was like, oh, okay, like this is too personal, or I don't want to put my dad out there. Um, but when my dad, especially early on before we got the medication correct, when he first um, was really suffering from the symptoms mentally, he would have these manic episodes and these also, depressive, really depressed episodes. And I remember one time when he was having a manic episode, he just kept on talking and talking and was really emotional. Um, and I was kind of, just there taking it all in. And then later that night, he said, "Oh, that would have been great if you would have got that on camera." And so then I talked about it. I was like, "Oh, are you okay?" And so I think him as a filmmaker, he can still separate himself from the film, from his own character, and he knows that, any film for it to be good depends on how deep, how vulnerable, and how dynamic the characters can be. Um, so I think after that, it was kind of anything goes. That was his way of telling me, um, you got to shoot everything. Um, it is what it is. We're not trying to really sugarcoat what I'm going through. But I think the only reason he was doing that is because he would still do anything for me as a father, and being my mentor and dad, he's very concerned about my career, and he was so for him, like, he'll do anything for me, and he knew that the more vulnerable he could be in front of the camera, potentially the better the film could be. And so I think it was only because I was making the film, and it's only probably because his support and his love for me, that he was willing to put himself out there. And so, I think at that point I started filming. Uh, you know, so in that specific scene, that wasn't actually a shoot. We were just having dinner or lunch with. I was just having lunch with my parents, and he kind of started to go into it and kind of got in a little bit of a manic or depressed state, and that's when I pulled out my phone, and started filming. So, um, yeah, and I think a lot of that. I don't know if I asked him if it was okay, but I definitely showed him that scene early on, and and he didn't have a problem with it.
What were your dad's first comments on the finished film?
Well, he's to this right now. I've shown him when we locked picture, and so, and even now that we have the sound mix and the graphics and the color correction, he doesn't want to see it until he wants to see it on the big screen at the premiere. So I think that's, he's definitely really excited about the Sundance premiere. But I think I was showing him cuts the whole time, and I think the one thing he would say is like, I just don't want this film to be a downer. And
Mhm.
I think as emotional as it is, I think hopefully there's some levity also, and there's some humor. And so I think he the whole time I was showing it, he'd be like, "Yeah, it's getting there." He'll be like, "Oh, it's starting to shape up." And then I think finally, when I basically told him we're close to lock, he was like, "Oh, it's coming together. Like I think." And then, yeah, I think finally when I showed him the the final cut, I think my dad is very he'll give me very detailed critiques and notes, but then his approval is very short. So I think, he told me the whole time what was wrong with it, but then by the end, I think, he watched it, and he said, "Well, yeah, looks good to me." And then I think, another time he said, "Well, you pulled it off." And I think, for my dad, that's as high as praise as I'm gonna get.
What does it mean to you to like screen this at Sundance, have your pops there, have your whole family there? What does that mean to you?
It's really a dream come true. I mean, and it's really kind of surreal, and it's still surreal. I think there's so many parallels in this film, right? One, he was my age when he made the film on his dad. Um, you know, my son Prince is the same age he was when he was incarcerated at Manzanar during World War II. I was born in the middle of production on Hito Hata. My daughter Malaya was born in the middle of this film. And the first time I ever saw falling snow, the first time I ever went to Sundance was when my dad premiered his short film, Toyo Miyatake, Infinite Shades of Grey. And so it's kind of this family this this family, the way we do things, right, is like all my vacations that I ever went on were production shoots or screenings, and that's kind of carrying on with. So this will be the first time my kids see falling snow for the first time, is at Sundance. So I think it is this full circle moment. Um, the fact that his last film that he directed premiered at Sundance. One of my first films, Pilgrimage, premiered at Sundance. Um, and yeah, it just feels like a big full circle moment for us to come there with this film. And yeah, just super excited. I mean, I also too think that you know I very much hope that when people see the film, they see themselves in it and they see our community in it. Even specifically Little Tokyo, or even the film community that you and me are a part of. Um, so I do feel like we're representing the community at Sundance, which has lacks lacks community, um, and I think that I'm very proud of that too, and excited that a lot of um, other Asian Americans, other Pacific Islanders, who have been doing the work with us this whole time will also be there to kind of celebrate that moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Aram told me he's gonna be there, and then all of a sudden I got FOMO. I was like, "Yo."
You should come. You should come. You should. I'll offer Aram's bed to you, and you can share Aram's bed.
All right, I'm gonna text him that after this. I've known you since Yellow Brotherhood. I think I saw that at the VC Film Festival and stuff. How do you feel? I mean, you said this is the most difficult film you've ever made, which is completely understandable. But how do you feel like your filmmaking has evolved?
I mean, I think at that time, I mean that's the fun part, right? Is all we've all grown up together, both socially and professionally, and I think at that time, I had, and we all kind of had to do everything ourselves, right? So with Yellow Brotherhood, I filmed most of it, I edited it, directed it, and really, I think since then, even I realized that back then I really wasn't directing. I was shooting and editing. I didn't have to explain and share and articulate my vision to someone else who was shooting, or so to someone else who was editing. So I think like the Jake Shimabukuro film and Mele Murals was kind of the first time I worked with another DP. And then
Hmm.
that's when I realized, oh, I really don't know how to direct. I know how to shoot, but I don't know how to direct another shooter. Uh, and even with this film, this is, the second time I've worked with another editor. And like, again, I was realizing, oh, I know how to edit, but I don't know how to direct an edit. I don't know how to direct an editor. Um, and also it was this one was unique too, where it was very much more collaborative. It's not like I just directed the edit. I mean, it was much more of a collaborative process. But I think that's the biggest thing of from then till now is actually learning how to be a director, or what that means, um, as well as slowly learning how to be a producer too. Because again, back when we were all starting, we all had to do everything, which was very valuable. But I think when you're doing everything, it's all just one thing. You don't really know what a director does. You don't really know what a producer does. So I think as I'm worked with more and more experienced people that are more and more experienced than I am, I've learned from them, and I think now I feel like I'm starting to learn how to direct versus just be a filmmaker. I would say that's the biggest thing.
Watching the doc, admittedly, I haven't seen all your dad's movies. Where are they, and how can anybody watch them?
Got to text Abe and go to Abe's crib and and watch it with Abe. That's the only way you're gonna see these movies.
Wait,
No,
you-
but no. So luckily, I fortunately,
because
Francis
I'll
and
do
Visual,
it.
yeah, I know. Francis and Visual Communications has done a really great job of raising funds. So in the recent years, both Hito Hata and Watari Dori have been restored to 4K. I think some of the early ones, Cruise in J-Town, some of the early VC films have recently been restored, um, as well as now that Manzanar is part of the Library of Congress, that's been restored. So my hope is that, well, VC has been screening Hitohata the last year, but my hope is to, with this film, to really try to get some of the film festivals, try to get some of the theaters to maybe do a retrospective of my dad's work in accompaniment of third act. So hopefully that'll happen. But I know the plan is, to get Hitohata, to get Watari Dori and Manzanar more accessible online for educational purposes. But I also think it would be great to experience it in a proper theater with, as it was made to be seen.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that. Where do people find you, dude?
Could I'm not as active on social media as I wish I could be or was, but yeah, I'm mainly on Instagram at Tadashi Nakamura Films, and then Third Act is Third Act Film on Facebook and Instagram, and the website is thirdactfilm.com.
Thank you for talking to me. Thanks for making that film, man. It was it was great. I've known you for years, but I found out things that I did not know. You know what I mean? I didn't know that you always that you had these frosted tips. You bring that back, bro.
I know like I had to any I would say 80% of Asian Americans in the 90s at one point had bleached hair of some kind. Or did you never went
Dude,
the
I mean, I
blonde?
went honestly, I did some things with my hair. I had
We made a whole
braids and
film about it.
I had braids, I had dreadlocks in high school and early in college, man. So I was that dude.
Bring that, yeah, bring that back. I'll bring the bleached blonde back. We
No, if
could
I bring that back, you're getting the salt pepper perm.
yeah, no, we full midlife crisis era. Let's do it. I'm down.
I told you, man. I'm just 25, man. Just 25. All right, man. Thank you for taking the time talking to me.
All right, man. No, appreciate it. Thanks, Patrick.
All right.